It wasn't easy growing up in the 80s. Crack came out. Reagan was president. I'm from a town called East Orange, New Jersey. I lived on Hamilton Street, right between Park Avenue and North Clinton. All kinds of crazy shit used to go down in the neighborhood. Crackheads jumping through your window. Fiends on the corner fighting for a little pebble. It was hard for me to stay away from the streets even though shit sounded real crazy. It seemed a little intriguing. I didn't really have shit. My parents fought all the time. I was bouncing from place to place. We lived in my grandmother's basement. Never been able to seem to have a steady home. So I ran to the streets. I was able to get some money. I was able to eat. I had a couple of friends that I hung out with. We're gonna get into them later. We were some bad little motherfuckers. Doing stupid shit like burning houses down and robbing school teachers. Throwing bricks off the side of the overpass in the cars. Like, what the fuck was we thinking? Running from cops for no motherfucking reason. I mean, we was in the hood. We had nothing else to do, man. We didn't have no parents to guide us. I remember a time that I got caught in school with 50 grams of crack trying to be a drug dealer. Got caught with a 38. Tried to run home to my grandparents' house. They turned me in. What else they were supposed to do? Little dumb nigga. You see, my grandparents was preachers. My grandfather was a bishop, and my grandmother was a pastor. My whole family was a part of the church. They made me go on Sundays and Wednesdays, and at first I remember I liked it. Then after a while, I was doing other stupid shit, bringing crack to the church, and in between breaks I would go outside and serve some fiends so I could get a couple of dimes off, just so I can buy a pair of kicks. Like I said, man, niggas from the hood do stupid shit. You don't realize how stupid it is until you grow up. But this is the beginning. This is chapter 1, A Stories from the Boss. I'm not just gonna sit back and act like I was this thug since birth. But to be honest with you, I don't have too many memories of happiness in a family life. As long as I can remember, I remember everything going bad. Before I moved back to East Orange, I was living in Mattawan, New Jersey with my grandmother and my aunts and my mother. She worked a lot. So I guess whatever was going on in the household, it just made it easier for us to be able to live there. Because before that, my aunt used to pick us up at 5 o'clock in the morning, bring us all the way down from one town about 45 minutes to go to school, and then pick us up in the evening and bring us 45 minutes back to go stay at her house while my mother worked. Mattawan, New Jersey wasn't really the ghetto. It was a beach town. It was fun. We used to go to the beach and go swimming. My aunt used to take us out and do all kinds of good things. But the main problem was I was a mixed child. My father's black, rest in peace, and my mother was white. And I don't know if anybody out there knows how it is to be a mixed child. It wasn't easy back at them times. It's still not easy now. People used to make fun of us, used to call me Oreos and zebras. I remember coming home crying to my mother all the time about how people used to ask me, what was I? Are you white or are you black? And I didn't know what to say. My mother told me that I was black and be proud of it. So that's what I did. But it seems like it didn't matter because I felt like I didn't fit in with either race. The black kids didn't fuck with me because my mother was white, and the white kids didn't fuck with me because they knew I was half black. So everything was difficult. And I still to this day don't know if it was just in my mind, but I always thought that my family didn't like me either because of my race. My grandmother used to be a really nice but hard woman, my mother's mother, God rest her soul. But I do remember a few times that she used to call me her favorite little nigga. And I never took it the wrong way at the time, but now that I think about it years later, I think that was a little bit crazy. Always told that I was her favorite grandson, but at the same time I was her favorite little nigga. But she was always nice to me, so I took it with stride. See, now as an older person, I could sit back and think that maybe the feelings I had about that really had nothing to do with me. You see, my father I always thought that he was a good person, but in hindsight, he was abusive, he was a drug addict. You know, numerous times I remember waking up to him beating my mother up and the cops showing up and him beating me and my sister for no reason. And I know drugs and alcohol are a son of a bitch, but I think maybe they had a little bit of spite against me because of the way he was. I know that it's normal. Things like that happen in the family on a regular basis, but it was still something hard to deal with. One of many of the stories I remember of the abuse that happened in the household. I remember my father was asking me if I seen my mother. Now, mind you, I was probably 5 or 6 years old, and I didn't know what to say. I thought my mother was at work. And I remember him saying to me, "Your mother's in hot water." He was walking in and out of the bathroom, closing the door, coming out, pacing back and forth. And as a naive little kid, I thought he physically meant he was going to put my mother in hot water, so I used to get scared. And also I remember he used to get so frustrated, he used to take his belt and put me over his lap and beat me, just because he was upset with my mother for whatever the reasons may be. Later on that night, I remember falling asleep on the floor, waking up to my mother screaming. She took an iron and took it out and held it up against my father's face while he was beating her over the head. Shit got crazy. Things were being broken. Table legs broke. Me and my sister were sitting back screaming, telling them to stop. As my mother tried to run out of the house, he took one of those old glass Maxwell House coffee jars to the instant coffee and threw it across the room and hit her in her head. She hit the ground and there was blood everywhere. Next thing you know, I remember my grandparents coming across the street. See, we lived right across the street from my grandmother's house. And then the cops were there. Child services tried to take us away, but then my grandmother said she would take us in. Thank God she did that. That's one of the last stories I remember, and my mother finally got enough strength to leave. From there, we moved to Belleville, New Jersey, into a battered women's shelter. I'm not sure the name of it, but I know it was in Claremont Hospital. I thought it was cool because it was right around the corner from my mother's sister Bethy's house, so we used to get the chance to visit her on a regular basis. This place sucked. I moved from an area that I was familiar with to an area I knew nothing about. I went to a school with people that didn't like me. See, this was a predominantly Italian neighborhood, and once again, me being a mixed child came back to haunt me and my sister. People chasing us home from school, people taking our lunch money, getting in trouble by the cops for jaywalking, all kinds of things. We were in the shelter for a little while, and there was a woman named Patty. She was one of the only white people besides my family that was nice to me, and I always wondered why. I knew she was friends with my mom, and I think that's why she took a liking to us. Not too long after we left the shelter, the people there helped us get an apartment. We moved to Hillside, New Jersey. I remember being so happy to finally have my own bedroom. Me and my sister had bunk beds. I had the top bunk. I was so excited. But that was short-lived. See, I didn't really know the details of what was going on, but years later my mother told me. The whole time we were in the shelter, and some time after that, my father was stalking my mom. He couldn't accept the fact that they were breaking up, I guess, and being that he was the way he was, there was a few times he used to pop up at our doorstep. I thought it was okay, because I was a kid, until the one day we were walking home from school. We met my mother by the Popeye's chicken, and it was raining. I remember this so well. All of a sudden, a car came out of nowhere and almost ran me and my mother and my sister off the road. A couple of inches would have took all of us out. Once I saw the car turn around, I noticed it was my father. And I said to myself, wow, I can't believe it. I love this man so much, and he just tried to kill us. Up until that point, my mother never said anything negative about my father, even though me and my sister knew what was going on. She wasn't the type to down-talk him in front of his kids. And I never understood why. But seeing that blue Buick come down the block, and especially now that I think about it, I'm getting a little emotional. What the fuck was going through his head? Was he trying to take us out? Was he really trying to kill the mother of his kids and his 2 kids? Or was he just so high and out of his mind that he had no idea what he was doing? Either way, that's something that's unacceptable. And every time I sit back and say to myself how I miss my father, he's been dead about 30 years. He died when I was 10. These memories come back and it makes me so mad. I wish he was here, not only to guide me as I'm growing up, or maybe to talk to when I'm having an issue, but to ask him what the fuck was going on. How could you actually try to hurt us? What did we do wrong? I remember seeing him one more time, and even after everything I just explained, my mother still allowed him to come to our house for Christmas to spend time with his kids. It's the only memory that I consider good. I remember making a paper mache candy cane. He came into the house, he had a burgundy sweater on. I gave him the candy cane, and that was pretty much it. From that point on, I never seen him again. Soon after, my mom told us that she had a new boyfriend. And I didn't know how to take this. Again, I was young and it really didn't make a difference to me. As long as she was there with us, I was okay with everything. It took a while for her to finally bring him around, and I respect that. She wasn't the type to just bring another man around her kids. But after a couple of months, I started noticing him being at the house when we came home from school. To me, it was kind of awkward. He didn't speak English. He was a big, intimidating guy. And honestly, I was scared of him since the day that I met him. But it seemed that he was treating my mother well, so there was nothing I could do about it. He had a couple of other kids. I thought it was only one. Turns out he had multiple other kids. At first, I thought it was cool to have a little brother, because up until this point, it was just me and my sister. But after a while, I realized it wasn't as cool as I thought it may be. Always seemed like he treated him better than he treated us. At this time, I was probably 6 or 7 years old, and my sister's 1 year older than me. But the first Christmas we spent, I remember I thought it was good. I was like, wow, we got all of these Christmas presents under the tree. But again, I'll get back to it. I was a bad little kid. I got in trouble in school all the time. And the day I came home from getting suspended for lighting a fire in the bathroom, I realized why I was so scared of him after all. I didn't even know this man. The first thing he did was walk up to me and punch me right in my face. I never been beat like this before. I always got spankings, or maybe slapped on the lip or hit with a switch. But this man punched me right in the face and knocked the wind out of me. I fell flat on my chest. And I remember getting up and running into my bed, waiting for my mother to get home to tell her what happened. But nothing happened after that. I never spoke to my mother about it. I knew she knew about it, and I always thought that she didn't care. I was thinking, just my luck. Once I thought things were getting better, the violence and the bullshit came back. But this time it was directed towards me. And this wasn't the last time that this man's violence came down on me like the hailstorm that I thought that it was. It would have been okay if I just got regular spankings. But I think 2x4s against the back, pool sticks cracked over the head, being punched in the mouth and knocked unconscious is definitely not a way to discipline your child, especially when it's not your own child. And I know for a fact that he's one of the reasons I am the way I am now. So y'all know me as Bobby the Boss Man and not to be fucked with. But I was never like that growing up. I was a little wimp. I was a little scary little boy that didn't have any direction. Walked around dazed and confused most of the time. But that was short-lived because things were about to change. One day my mother told me we were going to be moving. We moved from Hillside, New Jersey to Elizabeth, New Jersey. Turns out it was a whole nother monster over there in Elizabeth. More like East Orange and more hood-like. I took a liking to it. There was a lot of different people out there, a lot of different kinds of people. I made a lot of friends. Walking to school every morning, we used to walk past these projects. My mother used to tell me all the time, don't go down there, and what did I do? Of course, I went down there. I met a couple of people that were like me. That's how I started getting into the drug thing. I was walking down the street one day going to school, and I saw something on the ground. This was a normal thing, because in the neighborhoods I come from, there was always needles and drug bags on the ground, so I was very familiar with what they were. So I decided to pick it up and noticed that it was filled. I've never found a filled drug vial before. This was the first time. They were always empty. Couldn't have been more than 5 minutes. I was walking down a block and somebody walked up to me and asked me if I was straight. And in my hood means when you say if you're straight, that means are you holding. And I just said, yes, I hit the jackpot. I'm straight. I sold him that little vial. I got $10 and I kept it pushing. I didn't really have any money before that because, like I said, I come from a troubled family. There was never an allowance or anything like that given to us as kids. So just having $1 would make me happy. But this time around, I got $10 off of something I found off the ground. I needed to find more. So I remember being in school that day and all I thought about is, wow, how I made this $10. And on my way home, I'm going to walk back through the projects and ask somebody, where can I get more? And that's exactly what I did. I took my $10 and turned it into 20. And then I took that 20 and turned it to 50. And then from that point on, I was selling dime bags on the way to school every single day. Even though I was a quiet kid, I was able to use that to my advantage. Not only was I quiet, I always had a mean look on my face. And I always looked a little bit older than I actually was. So that right there gave me enough courage to walk up to some of these street niggas that was doing their thing that normal people wouldn't walk up to on a regular basis. They didn't know I wasn't from the neighborhood. They just thought I was somebody from across town, so they fucked with me. And because they see me walking every day, everything was all good. I remember the first time I got into a fight. It was this Puerto Rican kid named Tito. I never liked him. And it was only because he thought it was cool because he was rocking a leather jacket. Back in the day, we used to have triple fat goose. And the one thing I could say about my stepfather, he did keep us fresh. So I had a black triple fat goose and he had a red one. And we basically looked at each other like my shit is better than yours. And one day I was talking to this fine little Puerto Rican girl and he walked up to me and told me it was his sister. And I kind of got stumped. I didn't know what to say. Being the quiet little boy that I was, I never had any altercations before. But I knew this time I had to come out of my shell and I had to represent. Because the last thing you want to do is be a punk in the hood. So I basically told him to go fuck himself. In so many words, he punched me in my face, I punched him back, the security guards broke it up and we kept it pushing. The funny thing was, me and this kid, for the next year or two, became closest friends. Not too far after that, I came home from school one day, thinking it was just a regular day. Come home from school, do my homework, and get out of the house before my mom got home from work. But this day was different. I walked into the house to see about 4 or 5 people that I've never seen before. Like I told you before, my stepfather was from Cuba, and he immigrated over on the boats back at that time. It was happening a lot. It was his mother and his 2 brothers, and I think it was his stepfather moved in with us out of nowhere. So I went from being a household of 4 people to 7 or 8 people. 4 different bunk beds set up in the living room, and a whole nother life was just about to begin. Marcos and Tony was my stepfather's younger brothers. Even though they were older than me, they took a liking to me and they were pretty cool. Nothing like their brother. They made me feel welcome from day one. And then mother Sarah also. She was the grandmother that I wish that I had. After my father passed, me and my father's family were estranged just because of the fact I was living with my mother. We moved around so much. But now I felt like I had a family. After a year or so of this going on, we moved to Miami. One day we were living in Jersey. The next day we were living in Miami. Overnight, things changed. You see, I never knew what my stepfather did for a living. I never knew why we used to pick him up on the corner in North in the middle of the night. Or why he used to hand my mother wads of money. I always thought he was a truck driver, but I was a stupid little kid. And as I got older and I started dealing with drugs on my own, I started to realize what he was actually doing and why he had so much money and why we were able to go out and do so many things like go to the World Trade Center, go to the top of the Empire State Building. This is definitely not a life that I'm used to, but I was able to get used to it quick. Moving to Miami was a big change for me. It was always hot. There was a lot of different kinds of people. And once again, we moved into a neighborhood that didn't take a liking to black people. My stepfather was from Cuba, but they were the dark variety. So just looking at them in hindsight, you would think they were black. I remember one day we were chilling at the house, me and my sister waiting for my mother to get home from work, and I realized it was starting to get late. Looking down the street, out the window, we saw what looked like fireworks, but it turned out to be Ku Klux Klan members walking down the street burning crosses. And this is something that has been stamped in my mind, and I'll always remember. Me and my sister were scared to death. There was nothing we can do. There were no cell phones at the time, so we couldn't call Mom to come home and rescue us. All we had to do was watch. It's a fucked up situation, and things got worse than that. On another day of us sitting home waiting for Mom to get home from work, me and my sister were being nosy and looking in the closet, and we started looking through some books that were in there. Not knowing what we were looking at or what we were dealing with, we saw a book that said Santeria. And being that my stepfather was Cuban and I didn't notice that he practiced these rituals on a regular basis, I was wondering what it was all about. So as we started reading the book, we came up to a part that said spells. And in a joke, me and my sister, because of the fact that we didn't like my stepfather that much, decided that we were going to put a spell on my stepfather. You see, he was mean. He beat me. He made me bleed. He made me feel uncomfortable. And I'm sure he was like that with other people around him. So playing around with this book, I don't remember the exact words of what we did. We thought we put a spell on him. The fucked up thing is, that night my mother and stepfather never came home. And after a day or so, I remember getting a phone call or someone coming into the house, I'm not really sure. But it turns out that they got into a bad accident the night before. And my stepfather was in the hospital. My mother was in the hospital. My mother broke a bunch of bones in the right side of her body. My stepfather broke his hip and a couple other things because he was thrown from the car. And I said to myself, fuck, what the fuck did I do? Now, this is the first time I'm talking about this. So anybody out there listening, this is all facts. I would never come on this and tell you guys a story that wasn't true. And I remember when my mother finally came home, I felt so bad because she was in pain. And I wanted to make it right. I wanted to tell her what me and my sister did, but I was scared. I didn't know how she would react, if she thought we were telling the truth or not. And the way things were between me and my stepfather, I remember seeing him walk into the house weak and in a walker. And it made me smile. I was happy that he was finally feeling the pain that I felt for all of these years. Every time he punched me in my face, every time he hit me over the head with a piece of wood or whatever he can get close to him and watch me bleed on the floor, I said to myself, I hope you're feeling the same pain, motherfucker. Even though I knew that was probably wrong, this is just the way I felt. I couldn't help how I felt. And then I started to realize that I think he thought exactly what I was thinking and that he didn't like it, because he started to act a little bit different towards me. More aggressive, more hostile. His beatings became more violent. The next time he hit me, me and my little stepbrother was watching TV, and he punched me in my arm. And all I did was turn around and tap him back. While this was happening, my stepfather was behind us playing pool. Next thing you know, I was unconscious on the floor with a puddle of blood around my head. This motherfucker really took a pool stick and cracked me over the head and had no remorse. And when my mother came home, he basically looked at her like, what the fuck are you gonna do about it? That's the one time that I did hear my mother yelling and screaming at him, what did you do to my son? I don't know what happened after that, because I went to my bedroom and I stayed there. And still to this day, I don't know if he was ever violent with my mother, but I'm pretty sure he wasn't just like this with me. There was only one time that I seen him put his hands on my mom. We were driving down the street, down in Miami, coming from a party at night. And I was in the back seat, playing with the button to the window. See, this guy was big with cars. And at the time, we had one of those really nice long stretch Cadillacs. And I was hitting the button, putting the window up and down. He turned around and punched me in my head. Just so happened to punch me in the same spot that he hit me with the pool stick the week before. My mother looked at him and told him to turn around because he was about to crash, and he smacked her. That's the only time I remember me screaming out, "Don't touch my mother," and he turned around and smacked me. I decided that I wanted to run away and get away from it. I decided to start hanging out with Marcos and Tony more often. See, where we lived at was somewhat the suburbs. All I had to do was walk a couple of blocks down the highway and cross the road. And that'll put me right back in the hood where I was more familiar. But the hood in Miami was a little different than the hood in New Jersey. There was gangs all over the place in Miami. And Marcos and Tony were down with the Latin Disciples. I thought that'd be cool because every time I saw them, they were with 100 people and they were doing a lot of fun shit. And I decided I couldn't take the beatings anymore, so I needed to toughen up, and they helped me do that. After a while, a couple of the other gang members decided I needed to start putting in work. You see, gangs are a little different now than they used to be. You used to have to put in work. Nowadays, you can just walk and say that you're a gang member and everybody respects you. But in my era, you really had to put in work. And if you weren't willing to put in work, you wasn't down. So I remember the first time they had me put in some work. It was nothing crazy. There used to be this cell phone store in a plaza, and this is where cell phones first came out. And back then, they used to keep the cell phones in the window. So I was told to walk up to the counter and keep them occupied. And then a friend of mine would come in and act like he wanted to buy a cell phone. So as the friend was trying to make the deal, my job was to go into the window display and rip off all the cell phones. I was nervous. I didn't know what to do. But I did it. And I didn't get caught. So all that did was make me more excited to put in some more work. In the same plaza, not too many days later, there was a laundromat that we used to frequent. It used to have the old Street Fighter video game in there. And I used to go in there and play Shinobi on a regular basis. We noticed that there was a cash box behind the register they'd left unattended. So we decided to figure out a way on how we can get back there and get that cash box. Before we actually did the jukes, my boy Andy decided to give it a trial run. He walked behind the counter, casually, picked up a couple of roller quarters and walked out. And I was surprised. I said, oh shit, he got away with it. Nobody seen him, he didn't get caught. Now it's time to make the major move. And that was my job. So the next day we went in and we played it casual. Nothing different. I walked up to this machine. I started playing Street Fighter and Shinobi like I always do. And I started watching the cash box. The only difference was, this time, somebody was sitting at the desk. And I started to run out of quarters before I realized that they weren't going to leave it. And I had to get out of that store. I didn't want to start looking suspicious. And to be honest with you, I got tired of standing there. Right as I was walking out the door, I noticed the person got up and walked into the bathroom. And I said to myself, this is your move. Let's get it. So I walked behind the counter, I grabbed the cash box, and I started hitting towards the door. As I got close to the door, somebody grabbed me, and they started pulling me down towards the door. I was paying attention to everything. I thought I had everything planned out nice. But this whole time I didn't realize there was more than one person that worked in the store. And maybe the person was watching us the whole time. But my boy Andy wasn't trying to hear that. As soon as he saw me hit the ground, he grabbed the cash box and took off. A little bit of scuffling went down. They went to go run after him, and they let me go, so I was able to take off also. Make a long story short, we wasn't able to go around that plaza again for a long time. But it was all good though, because we wanted to start getting into bigger things, bigger jokes. Stealing cell phones as cash boxes for little kids, and we were starting to grow. And we wanted to put in work for our gang because that's what we did. So we moved on to the stolen car thing. In Miami, carjacking was a regular thing. You couldn't drive down a block in the middle of the night without somebody running up on you and taking you out of your car and leaving you there in the street. So we decided we didn't want to walk around anymore. And there was a lot of people riding around in a lot of nice cars. Miami's big with the low riders and the rims and the systems. And we didn't have it, and we needed it, and our team needed it. So we decided we was going to get down with that. I remember the first time we stole a car. It wasn't because we were trying to be criminal. It was because we were stuck somewhere and it was 100 degrees and we didn't want to walk. So we walked around looking for the easiest car to steal. It didn't take long before we noticed the Monte Carlo SS, the black joints with the red SS on the side, running on the side of the road in front of the convenience store. It ain't take us but 2 minutes to hop in and take off. See, my man Andy was seasoned at this shit. This nigga knew how to drive probably from the day he was born. So we took off, and we had that car for a couple of days. And the way that we did it was, instead of throwing a car away, every time we saw the same type of car, we would change the license plate. I was younger than everybody, so I was the one that had to do it. They gave me a screwdriver. I ran up to the other car that wasn't stolen, and I switched the license plates out from the non-stolen car and put the stolen car plates on it, and then put the other plates on our car. It worked for a while, but one day the cops got hip to what we was doing. We were driving down the highway. We was chilling. When we were so comfortable in the stolen car, we thought it was ours, so it was not a big deal to see cops. But this time around, I guess they knew what we were doing and they ran the plates. They tried to pull us over, and we wasn't playing with that shit. My man Andy put the pedal to the metal, and he took the fuck off. 95 miles an hour down the road, we was driving, probably about 10 minutes, in and out of streets, ducking and dodging. We thought we lost them. Not realizing, as you moved into another town, the cops were able to dispatch over and let them know that there was someone in a pursuit. So we went from one town and started getting chased by the other cops in the other town. As we were driving down the highway, a red light came. This time he wasn't able to duck and dodge. He hit the brakes. The car started to spin out, and it flipped over a few times. I was in the back seat. Why was I the only one with a seatbelt on? Only God knows. But the other two guys in the car weren't so lucky. The guy in the passenger seat I didn't know that well, but I knew he was part of the team because he was always around. And he ended up breaking his back. My boy Andy that was driving, he broke both of his legs. I was the only one that didn't get hurt, but I was also the only one that got locked up. Their injuries were so bad, they ended up going and getting picked up by a helicopter and being brought to the emergency room. I don't know what ended up happening after that, but I spent a couple of weeks in jail. My mother refused to pick me up. I called her and I begged her to come get me out of jail, but she wasn't trying to hear it. I understand now why she was like that, but at the time I wasn't trying to hear it. After a few weeks, eventually she ended up coming and picking me up, and they gave me a court date. What did I do? Went right back to the streets and right back to stealing cars. I never did go to court. So from the age of 12, I was on the run from the cops, and I didn't give a fuck. I didn't care what my family thought. I didn't care about running away and not going to school. All I wanted to do was be in the streets and be with my homies, because those are the only ones that seemed like they gave a fuck about me and was able to do things for me that I needed to have done. Not saying that my mother was a bad mother, I just didn't give her a chance because I was so upset about what used to go down with my stepfather. So I decided to just live in the streets and do what I gotta do. The last time I ran away from home is when shit really got real. You see, I used to run away all the time. I used to go to school, and on my way home, I just didn't get off at the bus stop. But this last time I decided not to get off at the bus stop, there was police and my mother waiting at the bus stop for me. And they started to chase the bus. I just finished telling you guys about how my mom got injured in the accident. Once the cops finally stopped the bus, my mother came inside the bus and hit me upside the head with her crutch and made me get off of the bus. I thought that I was just gonna go out, go home, and everything would be back to normal. But this time around, the cops didn't bring me home. They brought me to the juvenile detention center. And because I had been on a run and I never went to court, they kept me in jail for another few weeks. And because I was under the age of 18, the judge just sentenced me to a group home. I lived in a group home for a little while and bounced back and forth between group homes before I finally got let go. I went back to my mother's house, and within a couple of days, I was right back in the streets. But when I got out, the stolen car thing was dead. They were into bigger and better things, I thought. Home invasions and robberies. That's where the real money was. And being that now I thought I was a tough guy, I was able to handle my business and put in more work for the team. Because I was smaller than most people, and I was able to get into places that nobody else can get into without being noticed, they gave me a job. I had to crawl in through the windows and unlock the doors. And once we unlocked the doors, it didn't matter after that. If someone caught us, we would bang them out. It only happened to us once, and it turned out to be a lot worse than I thought it would be. You see, we didn't really give a fuck if anybody noticed us once we was inside the house because we came in deep. We didn't just go in with 1 or 2 people. We went in with like 5 or 6. This one time we went into a window, unlocked the basement door, and as we walked in, something fell and made a loud noise. Most people would have ran, but we was ignorant. We decided that we was going to keep going and do what we came to do. As we walked up the stairs, we noticed a man standing there with a bat in his hand. We didn't run, we just charged him. This motherfucker was not trying to go down. He was a tough motherfucker to get to the ground. But we beat the shit out of him. By the time we left the place, we took all the goods and left him laying on the floor bloody. I'm not proud to say it and I'm not bragging, but that's just the way shit went down. And all that did was make me more excited. It gave me a little bit more energy, and it made me want to do it again and again and again, which I did. Every time we went into a house to steal shit, it made it more easier. I got more cocky and more comfortable. We was able to get away with that shit, even though it made the news and they had no idea who it was. We can get away with anything. So we continued to do our dirt. The last time I remember doing a home invasion, shit got real. Everything went as planned as normal. I crawled in through the window. This time I couldn't get into the basement, so I opened up the back door. Once we got in, everything was smooth. We were on our way out the door. As soon as I walked out the door, my guys were behind me. And I thought that we were all out, and all of a sudden I started hearing gunshots. I hit the ground. I didn't know if I got hit or anybody else got hit. But the person was watching us the whole time. And I think instead of calling the cops, he figured he'd blast us right there on sight. Nobody got hit that day, and we did get away. But that was the last time I ran up in the house. I don't know what happened with anybody else, but I learned my lesson that time. I wasn't trying to get killed over some bullshit. But it definitely didn't make me want to stop doing crime. See, I was a criminal at the time. Even though I was under the age of 18, that's all I knew. I didn't give a fuck about getting a job or going to school. I just wanted to be a thug, just like everybody else. It wasn't cool to go to school or do the right thing or learn about college and things like that. That shit left me a long time ago. But one day I went home and my whole world changed. So me and my mother wasn't getting along, and she got tired of me running in and out of her house acting like everything was cool and not going to school and getting arrested and all of that shit. So one day me and her got into an argument. I don't even remember what it was about, and really it wasn't that much of an argument. I came home, she cursed me out, and what she said to me changed my world. See, I don't know if she was just upset or it just happened to come out at the wrong time. See, I didn't know at the time, but my father had AIDS, and he was dying. And I guess it was just a perfect time for her to tell me. Maybe she was thinking about it at the moment, or maybe it just blatted out. But she said, that's why your father's dying of AIDS. And even though I haven't spoken to my father in about 4 years at the time, I still had a weakness. I still missed him. I still wondered what was going on with him. I've only spoken to him one time, and now that I know that he was sick, I thought he didn't want to talk to me. Now I know that he couldn't talk to me. And I spoke to him over the phone. He didn't really say anything. I just heard his breathing in the background. And I couldn't believe it. After all that done happened, and after all this time, this motherfucker don't got nothing to say to me? I feel bad about it now, but at the time I was so upset that I didn't know what else to do, and I went right back to my regular rampage. Within a few weeks, I got the word that he had passed away, and I got shipped up on a bus to go to his funeral. It was one of the hardest things that I ever had to deal with. The last time I saw my father, he looked normal to me. This time when I seen him, he was basically a skeleton with skin, and I wish I never went to the funeral. I was so upset with my family and everybody else for abandoning me, so I thought. I had no idea why nobody wanted to speak to me, or how come nobody reached out throughout all this time. And why did it take my father to die for me to be invited back up to New Jersey? And it's fucked up, because all this time I was down in Florida running and ripping and doing my thing, and not ever once did I come back up to New Jersey to visit my father and my family. As soon as he died, my mother shipped me back up to New Jersey. And I'm not going to say I was mad. I got tired of ripping and running and not knowing what was going on. Me and my mother wasn't getting along. I barely saw my sister, and I hated being around my stepfather. I was living with a friend at the time. His name was Juan. He had a twin brother named Jose. His mother was real cool. She let me stay on the couch as long as I needed to. But that day, I thought something was up. Something just didn't feel right. I was sitting outside smoking a blunt with one of my boys, and right out of the corner of my eye, I see my stepfather walking up. He didn't look happy, and to be honest with you, I wasn't happy to see him. I stood up, because I thought I was tough and I was around my boys. But me being around my boys didn't mean shit to him. Before I had a word to say anything, bow, on the ground, broke my nose, dragged me into the car, told my boys to get to stepping, put me in the motherfucking car, drove me straight to the bus station, gave me $20, and I was on my way to New Jersey. February, in Florida, it's hot. I had on shorts and a t-shirt. But by the time I got up to Elizabeth, New Jersey off of the bus the next day, it was snowing outside and it was probably 10 degrees. I was not ready for what was about to happen. I was happy to be home, but the way it went down, I wasn't ready for that. Definitely wasn't ready for what was going to happen next. I didn't mind being in New Jersey. I loved it. But now I'm coming back to a family that I don't know and I haven't seen. And now that my father is dead, there's a lot of questions that I need to have answered. And I've never been able to get them answered still to this day. But moving back to New Jersey is a whole nother story that we're going to have to get into in chapter 2 of Stories with the Boss. And believe me, you're going to want to hear the rest of this because my life has been so up and down. I've been through so much shit. That's why I decided to do this audio book so people can get to know me and know why I am the man I am today. So thanks for listening to Stories with the Boss. It's your boy Bobby the Boss Man, signing out. Peace.